Have you ever been there? You say something and you mean well, you're trying to be helpful, but you just watch the other person's face kind of crumble. You had the best intentions, and yet somehow you still hurt their feelings. And it's the worst feeling, right? Well, let's dive into this and figure out what is really going on behind these painful, frustrating misunderstandings.
And yeah, this quote, it just nails it, doesn't it? It gets right to the heart of how we feel. We think, if everyone could just be direct, this would all be so much easier. But as we're about to find out, that huge gap between what we mean and what someone else hears, it's caused by all these invisible forces in our minds and our bodies. Stuff we don't even realize is happening.
So, this is it. This is the big question we're going to tackle. Why does this keep happening, even with the people we care about the most? It turns out the answer is this really fascinating mix of hidden brain biases, our own biology, and the simple fact that we all process the world in very, very different ways. All right, so first up, let's get a handle on the fundamental conflict that's at the heart of all of this. This isn't really about who's right and who's wrong. It's about two completely different realities crashing into each other. This is the key idea for everything we're talking about today, the intent-impact gap. See, your intent lives inside your head. It's your private internal reality, what you were thinking, what you were feeling. But the impact, that's their emotional reality. That's how your words or actions actually landed on them. And when those two things don't line up, that's where all the trouble starts. Let's make this real. So in your head, the reason you forgot the anniversary dinner was because of work stress. It's a situational thing. But for your partner, the impact is a deeply personal feeling, I'm not important to them. Same thing with offering help. Your intent is to support them, but the impact on them can feel like you're saying, you can't do this right. And here's the absolute kicker, the part we have to get. Both of those realities are 100% valid. So why is this gap so incredibly hard to bridge? Well, a huge part of the problem is that our brain has a kind of built-in PR department. It's constantly spinning stories that make us the hero, and a lot of the time it does that by making the person we hurt into the bad guy.
There's actually a name for this mental shortcut, and psychologists call it the actor-observer asymmetry. Here's how it works. When we're the actor, the one doing the thing, we are aware of all the reasons, all the pressures, all the context. But when we're the observer, just watching someone else, we don't see any of that. We just see what they did, and we jump straight to conclusions about who they are as a person.
I mean, think about it, right? When we mess up, we've got a whole list of totally valid external excuses. It wasn't my fault I snapped at you, I just had a horrible day at work. Or I would have been on time, but the traffic was a nightmare. We explain away our own behavior based on the situation.
But when someone else does the exact same thing to us, our brain just flips the script completely. We don't think, oh, maybe they're having a bad day. No way. We think, you are a rude person. You are just so inconsiderate. We blame their mistake on a deep flaw in their character. And this, right here, is one of the biggest reasons our good intentions can so easily get twisted into looking like bad character.
Okay, but this isn't just about the stories we tell ourselves after the fact. The plot thickens, because sometimes the problem is much deeper. Sometimes people are literally operating with fundamentally different neurological wiring. This is a game-changing idea called the double empathy problem. And what it says is that when an autistic person and a non-autistic person misunderstand each other, it's not because one of them is bad at empathy. It's because their experiences of the world are so different, they both struggle to empathize with each other. It's a two-way street, a mutual misunderstanding.
You can really see the massive shift in thinking here. The old way of looking at it saw autism as a deficit, like a broken part in one person that needed to be fixed. The new model sees it as a difference. The goal isn't to fix a person, it's to build a bridge of understanding between two different, equally valid ways of communicating. So, for instance, neurotypical communication is often full of indirect language, subtext, sarcasm, things you're supposed to read between the lines. But autistic communication often values being direct, literal, and honest. Now, neither of these is better or worse, but you can see how, when they collide, a well-intentioned direct comment can land like a blunt instrument if you're not expecting it.
This anecdote is just a perfect example. So, an autistic person was told there'd be cake at a party. The plan wasn't happening, so they asked a very logical, direct question to clarify. They weren't told about the unwritten social rule about not spoiling a surprise. Their intent was just to get information. The impact, of course, was a ruined surprise. It's a textbook case of that double empathy problem in action.
But it's not just our cognitive biases or our neurotype that can get in the way.
Sometimes our very best intentions are completely sabotaged by our own biology, especially when our brains are, quite literally, running on empty.
60%. Just let that number sink in for a second. What on earth could possibly increase by 60% inside your brain in just one night? The answer is pretty alarming, actually.
That's right. After just one night of bad sleep, your amygdala, that's your brain's emotional alarm center, can become 60% more reactive to negative stuff. When you're tired, you are literally biologically wired for a bigger, more impulsive, and more negative emotional reaction.
And it gets so much worse. See, being sleep-deprived doesn't just stomp on your emotional gas pedal. It also cuts the brakes. The part of your brain that helps you regulate those emotions, the prefrontal cortex, basically gets disconnected. So you're more reactive and you have less control. Now think back to that actor-observer bias. When you're exhausted, you are biologically primed to snap at someone and to judge their actions in the harshest possible light.
And this leads to another huge problem, the empathy gap. When you're feeling fine, calm, rested, you're in a cold state, it's incredibly hard to accurately remember or predict how intense a hot state, like anger or exhaustion, really feels. This is exactly why well-meaning advice like just calm down feels so infuriating and dismissive to someone who is totally overwhelmed. You're basically speaking from two different planets.
Okay, so we've seen how our brains, our biology, and our different ways of thinking can conspire to make us hurt each other. That's the bad news. The good news is we are not doomed to this cycle. There are clear, powerful strategies we can use to fix the problem and repair the connection when our intent and the impact just don't match up.
This is a fantastic 4-step guide for what to do in that moment. First, just pause. Take a breath. Don't give in to that impulsive reaction. Second, and this is the absolute golden rule, validate their feelings first. Say something like, "I can see that what I said really hurt you." You can explain what you meant later, but validation has to be step one. Then use I statements to talk about your experience without pointing fingers. And finally, you have to consciously make a choice. Choose connection. Choose to repair the relationship instead of trying to prove you were right.
The legendary relationship researcher John Gottman calls these things repair attempts, and they're like a secret weapon for shutting down conflict. They're simple phrases like, "I see your point," or, "You know what, my reaction was over the top." These little phrases are like a white flag. They signal that you care more about the person you're talking to than you do about winning the argument. They work like magic.
And really, that's what this all boils down to. We spend so much time and energy trying to defend our intentions, trying to prove that we were right. But what if we just change the goal? What if the true point of communication, especially in those really hard moments, isn't about winning at all, but about the simple, profound act of finding our way back to each other?